invite us now to go on to the first session proper of our conference, following that intro, entitled Less, Better Use of Antimicrobials at Farms. Mr. Witowski, Gerard Witowski, is going to be the chair to this particular part of our meeting. Thank you. Good morning. I'm a specialist veterinary doctor working in prevention of maladies, of illness, disease, and prevention over 40 years or so. We first of all always talk about holding-based problems in the field, as it were. Looking across Europe, though, at what's happened, basically, you'll see that there are commonalities, that about 60 to 80% of all treatments of all diseases go back to some sort of bacterial origin. And these bacteria may actually lead to infections, contagions, and get worse and spread. So it is indeed holdings, farms themselves, where it really counts. And so animal security, animal safety, it's what I'm involved in. My organisation, the Bavarian organisation, actually has allowed me to work over 40 years in Bavaria in disease prevention policies. And that's because I think our managers in Bavaria were had so much foresighted, and I think that applies to other areas in Europe. But we need confidence. We need to build up our trust, confidence, and knowledge, and that means that the veterinary specialist needs to have confidence in the therapies that he or she uses and believe in the measures that they pursue, which is why, irrespective of the farmer or the country, the veterinary specialists need to be involved. That's the way forward. Whether we're talking about small farmers, whether we're talking about part-time farmers, whether we're talking about academic specialists indeed as well, all these go together. It's absolutely necessary that we work on reducing antimicrobial resistance, and that's why I'm very pleased at this very first meeting now, or this first part of the meeting, that we're able to invite and listen to Mr. Dr. João Palmeiro, who has cattle and sheep as his specialisation in holdings there. He's a veterinary specialist. He's going to tell us about the European situation from his point of view. Following that, we will have Dr. Tourette and also Monsieur Bouchard and Madame Tourette, and they'll be speaking from France about what they're doing in their work in farm holding level operations, as well as in their own specialist organisations. And we'll have a coffee break as well, of course, but we'll try to fit in some questions and answers before the coffee break following the presentations. But I'd like to give the floor first of all anyway to Dr. Palmeiro, and he will speak this to us in
Buenos días a todos. Yo voy a hablar, hacer una pequeña presentación.
Good day and good morning. I'd like to make a short presentation on behalf of FESAS, which is the European Federation for Animal Health and Security, Safety. Our organisation, FESAS, has built up representation in a number of different member states, consisting of national health promotion, health protection organisations. It's those national organisations that are members of FESAS. I think we are quite a diverse setup, really, with a collection of organisations at national levels which vary from one to another. And of course this is a very mixed picture across Europe, where methods in farming have differed for many, many years, going back ages, different administrative structures, different approaches to breeding, and the economic situations are different as well. And economics, of course, breaks down into many different sub-aspects, exports, etc. But we account for 70% of the breeding animals across Europe, our particular association. So we do have an important role in the bigger picture, and I think we have to operate on that basis, understanding the framework and the overall context in which we work and live. Agriculture has always been and is terribly important to all of us and to Europe, and one of the major aspects that any professional must be involved in is the prevention policies, the prevention of diseases. Animal breeders, as well as their organisations, work closely together. We all work closely together, indeed, and cooperate with the veterinary services and with public authorities to achieve these objectives. We pursue cooperative measures and efforts, and this is work really, and a concern and an awareness which never ends, which goes on from day to day, and the underpinning of what we do is to work together based on cooperation and solidarity. That really is, I think, something that we all believe in, because it's essential for the success of our cooperative efforts. We're concentrating on AMR. The words here you'll see which we focus on are words such as resistance, antimicrobial, and our organisations over many years have been committed to this particular subject. Our member organisations, together with veterinary specialists, have indeed concentrated their efforts and developed even more focus on this particular subject in recent years. And that's because increasingly as time goes by, people are becoming aware of and indeed concerned about this subject of antimicrobial resistance, hence the increase in the commitment that we have to this. Individual measures, of course, involve holdings, involve farms. It's important that everybody is involved in these policies right through the sector and agrees and understands and commits to these acts. This invokes, of course, training and education, which, of course, never ends. The type of policies that we pursue require commitments and, of course, build on a voluntary, deliberate approach, and I think that's best achieved when farmers and when people in the sector believe that they are directly involved and directly concerned themselves with such subjects as these. All of us, I think, would believe in the importance of highest levels of health status, but we'd also see that as being directly related to how well the farm, how well services operate, and we'd also see that as being essential and part and parcel of animal health. These are equal links in a chain and qualify what a proper, well-managed, well-run farm is. Prevention is key, and I think breeders and all of us see this approach as essential. FESAS has organised a number of surveys, questionnaires amongst members and interested parties to find out locally what people most believe in as effective in pursuing prevention, in promoting better prevention. Direct measures are often referred to in response to our inquiries, and they're things like surveillance and diagnostic support, good practices, best practices, and biological safety, and the ongoing policies to pursue diseases which are not yet recognised or not yet fully understood. And this links to individual monitoring, the individual needs of particular operations, particular holdings, which may differ one from other and need a special understanding or particularly focused approach. Many studies have been organised about pathogens and about sensitivity to antibiotics. We also pursue passive surveillance policies where we have a number of protocols which we list here. We have these protocols to understand such things as abortions, as stillbirths, antibiograms under necropsy, and passive, of course, leads on to active surveillance as well, which we've listed. And you can see the titles there. Diagnostic tools, monitoring of resistance levels. These have to be managed and implemented as well as possible. Part of this policy is the correct collecting of samples. Samples must be taken before any treatment is, of course, given for any results to be able to, in order to be able to understand any results obtained in an adequate manner. Our organisation promotes in different aspects through its policies, different points of focus where we have protocols or we have recommendations on such issues as animal health. We have guidelines for that, proper surveillance, proper use, careful use and exact expert use of antibiotics, all things which are part of this subject, which we promote, which we continue to work on. And also, as I was saying earlier on, we also focus on individual farms, individual operations for certain aspects where we want to test the quality of meat and dairy products. That, of course, applies across the board, but into individual plants as well, and general quality considerations. That all brings me on to another chapter, which is biosecurity. And this refers to the fact that we understand pathogens, diseases can occur. We just need to understand how and why better. Now this, of course, biosecurity and AMR link in with each other, go together. Less use of antibiotics, cutting down on their use, will mean that AMR will have less potential to develop. Now we've seen this in various scenarios in terms of various examples. Management of a dry cow, a cow that does not provide milk. Respiratory diseases. These are areas where you can understand a lot. The mobility of an animal as well will tell you a lot, its posture and the way it moves. The operations, the holdings, need to be assessed in terms of their qualities, their qualifications to operate correctly, and then policies have to be introduced to prevent diseases appropriately at whatever level that particular holding requires. Moving on to the non-regulated diseases, well, there are a number of them. I mentioned them a few minutes ago, but they would amount to such things as IBR, BVD, tuberculosis. These types of diseases can be contagious, and that's why antibiotics are used in the face of these particular diseases. But moving on to my conclusions at this stage, in this rapid overview, prevention, as I've said already, prevention against AMR is absolutely important. No room for hesitation, and we have to work cooperatively. We have to work with veterinary surgeons, veterinary specialists, veterinary staff, and all of us. It's a question of stakeholders, of interested parties, getting to grips with this and fully cognising the extent and quality of this particular problem, of this particular reality. So conversation and communication, exchanges and contact with each other will be essential now. And always, sharing knowledge is essential. There are alternatives to antibiotics in many situations, but this should not be seen as being separate from animal welfare considerations. That has to be an ongoing focus for us. So our role really is centre stage. If we do believe in these policies, we are in a position to pursue them. And as I said earlier on, prevention should be one of the key ways of doing that. Thank you.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you, Joao, for such an excellent presentation. That was indeed a very interesting summary of what the agricultural organisations in Europe are doing and have been doing. I'd like to thank you, by the way, indeed, for saving us a little bit of time there. Thanks very much indeed for being aware of the time schedule, because we'd like to, following the presentation, have a little bit of time for some dialogue, open up the floor for some comments and questions. But now, following that presentation, I'd like to give the floor to our French colleagues who are going to give us a French point of view. Hello. Yes. We're going to tell you a little bit about some of our French experiences. Our presentation will consist of two parts. Firstly, organisational aspects of French breeders, and we'll illustrate Joel Palmero's presentation when we invite our farmer from the Rhone region, who's just sitting next to me, who will tell you about that, and that will illustrate many aspects of Mr. Palmero's last presentation. But now I'll start by telling you about some organisational aspects. Very technical, this next part. It's all about health policies, animal health policies. This really goes back to the 50s. The original trigger was bovine TB, but it broadened its approach, this policy, going back from the 50s into other health areas, and it's the linchpin, the interface when it comes to cooperation across French administrative departments, public health, animal health, involving a collective sanitary or health management in dealing with issues which are not managed directly by the state in France. The level of membership really accounts for the ruminant breeders, basically goats and beef breeders, cattle breeders, almost all of them. A little bit less in the pork and, well, quite a bit less in the pork and poultry sector amongst breeders. The GDS, its commitment was to assist veterinary specialists in prophylactic policies and managing sanitary or health crises. Also, to work together with breeders in setting up general or shared health management policies which are based on the need to combat or prevent diseases amongst animals. Also, specialist targeted services which we offer to operators in the sector on animal health, animal hygiene, and the quality levels of health commitments, health practices, and we offer training courses on that as well. The principles of our activity are based on this collective approach. The GDS is an association itself of health policy professionals and interested parties. We're not a liberal organisation offering services to members. We're involved in battling outbreaks of disease. We're based on mutual solidarity with funds which we set up, which are mutual funds which make funding available to members, whether they're affected by high levels of mortality or forced slaughter of herds. So this mutualist approach would be the sharing of prophylactic costs, subsidising work carried out in laboratories, which is essential to deal with outbreaks, preventing them or otherwise of diseases. Partnership also between all people in the sector, breeders, veterinary specialists and others. Then also all the levels going right through from the very local level right up to the national level, this is really important that we communicate right across the board, whether it's local, regionally, municipally, or nationally, whether it's at the level of the holding. All these parties must communicate with each other, and that's like a fine mesh which we consist of, makes up the fabric of our organisation, the GDS. We also possess technical expertise, technical competence in this area of health policies. So that was just the organisational backup there. Carrying on from the AMR presentation, we have all sorts of training programs actually, which we've been involved in these areas. Going back some years, we've had training programs for breeders, which we entitled Breeder and Doctor, or Breeder and nursing staff, care staff for one's holding. That particular program's been going since 2011. We have trained for 74 trainers in the sheep sector. That's basically one per department. The training takes place over 2 days, involves some practical exercises, one of which is that a visit takes place to the holding where at least one of the farmers is being trained, and you set up a local pharmacy. It arrives there locally, and they're shown what all the veterinary medicines are. They're told about the veterinary regulations, how to use the medicines, that type of thing. Actually, that's a module especially on veterinary medicines, with this AMR now aspect which has been added on recently, and we want to reduce by 25% the use of veterinary antibiotics through this particular instrument and others that we're pursuing. Regarding the anti-resistance policies, we in recent times have set up our training toolbox, our training program, different aspects to the curriculum there in our training program. It draws on different types of skills, educational skills, case studies, using of slides and audio-visual information, and an interactive approach to contact and communication with those we're communicating with, we're talking to. Also summary sheets which can be downloaded, which are available based on these particular programs for people's own use. But the resistance policy in France draws on a great many aspects. One important consideration is using research results, but that has to be translated into practical possibilities which could be implemented by operators, by farmers, so that real results are the conversion, if you want, from all this hard work and research and science. The next slide shows us this very first slide in one of our awareness raising modules. You'll see here the number of organizations support this initiative. You've got the GDS, which is the organization I'm representing there. We've got the Breeding Institute, which is a specialist body for applied research. We've also got over there the Practicing Veterinary Specialists in Rural Areas organization. We've also got the professional organisation for the veterinary industry. We've got the Dairy Industry Association. We've got the FNPL, which is the national organisation for dairy producers as well. So I just wanted to show you very, very briefly all those organisations and this backdrop to what we do, because it's, I thought, helpful for you to see how we work from the inside. I thought you'd like to know about our organisation from the French point of view. Enough of that. Vincent Bouchard is a real-life farmer from the Rhône. He's been involved in us, in our work with us, and we've decided to make this presentation together because, having given you that structure, that backdrop to how we work administratively, Vincent is a real-life farmer's come along. He is a dairy cow breeder from the Rhône, and he's going to tell us about how this all works in practice. Would you like to tell us about your work? Thanks very much indeed. Yes, I would indeed. My name is Vincent Bouchard. Together with my wife, actually, I work and live in the department of the Rhône. Our municipality is Avenat in the north of the Rhône. We have about 50 Montbéliard dairy cows with about 380,000 litres of milk per year. Quite hilly. About only 60% actually can be worked. We've got an altitude of 700 metres down there where I come from. I'm going to ask Vincent about his work. We'll have an interview, a discussion. You have a special role in the Rhône in relation to my organisation, our organisation, the GDS, that I've just been presenting to this meeting. Can you tell us how the GDS helps you, please? Yes, I will, certainly. I'm part of the Rhône GDS sector. I joined it in 2011. I joined the headquarters of the Secretariat almost straight away in 2012. Particularly, my responsibility concerns training of breeders in the Rhône GDS central office. As far as the GDS is concerned, we believe our work is very important. We wish to promote our activities as far as possible. We believe that health on holdings in breeding is very important. It depends on technical expertise and knowledge. It will lead to better economic results, and this requires great awareness of the importance of health issues amongst animals, amongst herds. Different subjects are involved in this. The health of the animals, the health of the animals, of the mother animal in weaning, accommodation, small-scale ruminants, right through the sector. We have all sorts of programs, training programs for all our breeders right through our department, taking account of all the different situations. We've got about 10 different training programs, maybe 12 in fact, and these benefit around, on average, when we deploy them, about 150 operators, farmers at a time. More or less, I would say that the satisfaction level that we've heard, anyway, our feedback is pretty high. Our colleagues, our farmer colleagues, have said that they're very happy and pleased to participate in this work. And one of the considerations is that we make big contributions financially to this. We spend about €100 per farmer, per department, via the GDS on these training programs. This year we're going to launch some innovations, two particular innovations. Firstly, to do with AMR, antibiotic resistance. Firstly, an open door. This open door platform will be in two holdings, two farms. In these two farms, we'll give a practical demonstration, organise a practical show as to how farmers work. We will organise a platform at these two holdings, at these two events, bringing farmers and veterinary specialists and other experts together in a dialogue. It's about discovering what works and what doesn't work. And if you can actually meet each other, if you can communicate together, if you can exchange practices, errors, mistakes, question marks, uncertainties, then I think we can all help each other and improve operations at holdings. Well, that was an interesting step that you just referred to in developing your training programs. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, please? Why do you do this? What's your motivation? And how is it that along the way people change their understanding, leading to a change in practices? Well, we compare the economic situation to the health situation as an average in all of our sector, and we decided that based on our measurements and statistics, we could do better. So we gave some thought to this. We contacted a number of breeders who had their own practices, which we felt might be worth learning something from. During the winter period of 2011, I myself took a training course on village operations, village holdings for calf and mother animal health, and that taught me how simple it is to actually take some early steps which can be very significantly, in a way disproportionately successful in producing improvements despite the relative minimum effort involved. That was an interesting aspect of the program for me and convinced me of the importance of these types of efforts, and that's helped me to feel more motivated and confident about what we're doing. But there is economics, there is business. One thing you can't deny is that if you talk about health and animals, it is a lovely thing to do. It's a great thing to do. What we believe in is good conditions, good living conditions, and healthy animals. Could you please tell us more about how you have developed your practices over time, how they've developed? Well, our approach has been very straightforward. We didn't actually commit very much in terms of finance or investment. What's been most important is time. energy, real observation and presence, where we actually look at animals, understand them, see their physiological status. It's this approach which is very, very important. The preparation of ongoing operations in farms, that's the key to this, the open door to proper production conditions and managing pathologies which are based on this early stage approach, such as calving and thereon. If we can get to better grips with calving and other particular important stages, the veterinary results will of course be improved significantly. But if there are fewer pathologies, it necessarily means that that's effective in cutting down the use of antibiotics as well. Well, may I ask you this? How have things developed on your holding, on your farm? What's that led to? What's that triggered in terms of changes? What are the real results that you've achieved? And have you been able to implement in practice as the measures and policies that you're talking about? Well, in terms of tangible results, can I share some figures with you? Particularly the problems around calving, around fevers, there's some problems. There were 4 to 5 a year back in 2011, but since then, 2014 to 2015, only 1 case of fever. So that's certainly moving in the right direction. We're doing pretty well. Non-delivery frequently occurs linked to use of antibiotics, but better preparation of the animals for calving has led to a big cut. Only 1 in 2014, 2 in 2015, but that was to do with twins. In more specific terms, we supervise animals very closely. We avoid, whenever we can, the use of antibiotics, if we possibly can. Any antibiotics used will only be used if temperature goes up. In the past, however, I believe that systematically, without questioning, we employed antibiotics in all these situations. We didn't question the use of that, but now we're doing that. We now ask ourselves, do we have to use an antibiotic? What is the best way forward? That's the first question. And even before that, we are aware of prevention. Prevention is a priority. Calf diarrhea, another thing. We look at the distribution of the quality of the colostrum and the quantity of colostrum which is distributed. I could actually summarize this by saying that over the last 2 years, the problem of diarrhea amongst calves has become pretty marginal, and there is no use now of antibiotics in dealing with this particular pathology. Can I share some figures with you? Auditing 2012, that means 2011-2012 accounting year, 14 euros for 1,000 litres of milk in 2012 for veterinary costs, half that in 2014. The half which have been saved is just based on simple, straightforward practices and a greater emphasis of observation. As I said earlier on, what we want to do is work with healthy animals. I think we need to spend more time. It's the quality of the time. It's being available to do this. I think it's absolutely essential that we just spend time and we have uppermost in our mind calmness of spirit and serenity. Can you promote further the cut down in the use of antibiotics? Do you think it's possible to do away completely with antibiotics? Is that your objective? What do you think is going to happen in the future? Well, yes, absolutely. When it comes to breeding, we want always to do better, develop our understanding further. In particular, the treatments that we've used systematically may not be right. We have to question ourselves, certainly in the dairy sector. We try to study the health status of an animal based on inflammation levels, that type of thing, and based on such observations we may or may not use antibiotics, but on a daily basis 2/3 of animals dry without antibiotics. We've been adopting that new initiative, that new policy of the last 18 months. We've got a new protocol also for breeding, which is pretty clear cut, and that's based on the cellular numerical calculation of the animal concerned, which a formula we use to calculate the use or not of antibiotics and how many. So there's a formula, there's a scientific formula we use, but half of the dry animals without antibiotics, basically half presently show no disease. I think actually this is pretty probative as a result. What we need though is great rigour in our operations, in our choice of practices, and this question of dry animals, and also accommodation. The quality of the lodging of the accommodation is absolutely essential. But as I said earlier, and what's really important is to adopt a step-by-step, straightforward, simple approach. It's amazing how much we can achieve on that basis. Another point, though, is that we are committed to what's known as alternative medicine by various people. Homeopathy particularly is something that's gained our interest. Phytotherapy as well, plant therapy. For example, 3 years ago, parasites have been got rid of using plant therapy, phytotherapy, no chemicals used to get rid of parasites for the last 3 years. We also control corporal measurements before and afterwards, and we have achieved some astonishingly good, surprisingly good results based on that. You asked me whether we can get rid of antibiotics completely. I don't think we can. That's not really our objective. I don't think it's going to happen. Let me give an example of a cesarean operation that requires the use of antibiotics, because we're talking about surgery. That really is absolutely necessary, and sometimes pathologies do occur, such as in 2013 spring, where in the Rhone it was very wet and very cold, high temperature amongst 1 or 2 animals with a pulmonary pneumonia infection, and the veterinary services prescribed 3 types of antibiotics in order to cover the problem as well as we could. What that means is that antibiotics do need to be used at times, but if we believe in prevention, then I think prevention is the trigger to using antibiotics more prudently, in a more targeted way, and better. Our motivation is actually a simple approach to breeding. Best possible conditions for animals and for ourselves as breeders. We believe that if animals can live in good conditions, then animals and the humans concerned can live and work and be together serenely, and we can also make a better living. You feel better in your skin, you feel better as a person, and you feel better as an operator, as a farmer, if you adopt this holistic approach to what you do and the animals in your care.
Ja, vielen Dank für diesen sehr...
Yes, thank you very much. That was a very impressive presentation. And I've got a question for Mr. Bouchard. Mr. Bouchard, have you got your headphones on? Can you understand me? French is on channel 3. French is on channel 3. English is on channel 2. Can you hear me? Can you understand me? Mr. Bouchard, I've got a question. You talked about the good example of good management and a good farm. Could you tell us a bit more about that? Could you tell us more about how important it is to have a well-run farm and how important that is for your colleagues? And maybe you could talk about how that works.
Oui, dans notre département.
Well, in my region, you've asked me what we do. Well, we do stress the importance of training. And we think that's one of the main ways and one of the most important ways of improving breeding in our region. And as for examples, well, sometimes it's difficult for us to get the farmers to come to us and complete their training. But once they have completed some training and opened up, as it were, well, then they do tell others about it. And quite often They pass on new working methods, they share their experience, and they do that quite happily. That's just one of the examples, I think, for you.
Ja, vielen
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I think we've had a very fruitful session this morning with these presentations, and my take-home message that I'd give you before the coffee break is something that Mr. Van Dijk has just said. We cannot do without antibiotics, but it is in everyone's interest for us to look at the lifespan of antibiotics and to look at that for every product, because new products aren't just going to grow on trees. We need to try to extend these lifespans as far as possible. And I think in veterinary medicine, the fact that we constantly have new animals being born and which don't already know what's going to happen, I think this means that we should still be able to continue to keep using the medicines that we already have. So I will just close this session and send you into the coffee break and ask you to come back at 11:05. I think we've done a lot this morning so far.